welcome to another episode of Focus On with myself, Alisa Mufukeng. And this time around, we're reporting from the capital city of Azerbaijan, Baku. And this is where the all-important United Nations Climate Change Summit, COP29, is being hosted. We had an opportunity to speak to some of the key stakeholders, investors, business leaders that are driving change towards climate justice. And this is what they had to say. Just for a start, just tell us about some of the key summit aims, especially as the IDC.
As the IDC, we're really driving industrialization in South Africa as well as in SADC. So it's very important for us to see how decarbonization and green transition can happen within the industrial sector. And therefore, COP is very important because one used to mainly talk about mitigation and about energy provision, but it's actually how do our industry adjust in order to be competitive over the long term, and what are the value chain opportunities that can be developed from this. Not only producing renewable energy, but actually products that's decarbonized that can be traded globally. So we're here to actually engage with the world, with different partners and funders to see how we can collaborate on a bilateral and a multilateral level.
And speaking of, Rian, just to expand a little bit on the importance of partnerships, especially with the like-minded stakeholders at forums like these.
New technologies in industry that is required for decarbonization is risky. So we need to create, and costly. So we need to create partnerships, whether it is from a skills, technological point of view, whether it's from a financing point of view, and whether it is from a regulatory point of view. That assistance and those partnerships need to be created so that we can create an ecosystem that is conducive for decarbonization in South Africa.
And what are the projects that you'd like to highlight under your portfolio in mining and metals, especially just in terms of moving the dial for South Africa's low carbon transition?
There's a lot of interesting projects happening. I think the first one is the transition towards a green hydrogen economy. So in terms of ammonia production, not only for export purposes, but also for our local industry as well as mobility, is one of our key focus areas. The second focus area is in the electric vehicle space. We want to see the transition to electrical vehicles, manufacturing in South Africa, as well as, of course, over time, utilization of electric vehicles. In the hard-to-abate sectors, such as steel and chemicals, we are developing projects in order to ensure that we actually can produce competitive products that will not be harmed by the CBAM and other carbon tax mechanisms. One good example is how to produce direct reduced iron quite competitively, given our iron ore and our steel-making capabilities. We believe that we can be one of the cheapest producers of that globally.
And Ryan, during your panel, you spoke about the issue around eradicating the issue of intermittency, just so that we can get to a level where we're able to fast-track the implementation and production of just energy transition. Just speak to me and spend a little bit more on that.
Of course, there are this problem within renewable energy with solar and wind. And what we need to do is to actually create now a multi-source solution to this problem. And this is where, for instance, battery manufacturing become quite important, the utilization of batteries in order to ensure storage, as well as utilizing other energy sources. But we are ambitious at the IDC. We do not only want to import batteries, we want to ensure that we develop that ecosystem and that value chain in South Africa. And that requires that we do not only beneficiate the critical minerals that is required for battery manufacturing, but also build on our battery assembly and our battery system capabilities to ensure that we create an industrial pathway for South Africa in this regard.
And just as a final thought, Rian, speak to me about what your message then would be to investors and what it takes really to pay the green premium that you mentioned during your panel.
South Africa has a lot of industrial capabilities. So in order for this economy transition, it is easier because we have a lot of skills systems and companies in place already actively involved. So we believe we have a competitive advantage in that regard. We need to ensure now that we create this partnership and taking it to the next level.
Just given the fact that the National Business Initiative is co-hosting with the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment at this year's COP29, speak to me about your theme of shaping climate ambition for a just energy transition.
We really can see already that the transition is not only necessary, but that it is happening. And so what we have within our control is whether we can get ahead of it or whether we're going to just be takers of whatever is coming. And so the need to be able to step up and say, can we help to shape, can we actually put forward the ambition that we know potentially could yield significant benefits for our economy and our people, and it's an opportunity we have to take. And so the NBI wants to work with companies that are leading in that space, that are seeing the opportunity in the transition, notwithstanding, of course, the challenges that we know that are going to exist, but saying how can we actually work together to shape that so that we can get ahead of that, we can actually start to ensure that the transition happens and that it is just, but also benefit from some of the opportunities. And so that's really what the NBI is attempting to do. It's doing that through the research work that we're doing. The Just Transition Pathways work, which came out a few years ago, clearly shows that there's massive opportunity to be had, but also that can actually be taken up with the right context. And so that's what we're looking at doing. And that's some of the things we do. And across the board, how do we ensure it is inclusive? How do we ensure that it's just? And of course, to be able to give that opportunity for an economic shift that can fundamentally benefit us as a country.
Yeah. And what is the importance then of bringing the public and private sector players in forums like this, just in terms of accelerating the jet transition?
It's very obvious that this is not something that any one player can do on their own. If we take just one data point, the financing is never going to be able to fund it by public sector alone. Private sector is going to have a massive role to play, is going to actually fund perhaps the largest part of that transition. And so bringing together the different players and the different entities is going to be critical to achieve this transition in a manner that is just and then, like I said, benefits society at large and allows our economy to prosper. So those partnerships are indispensable. I think public-private partnerships have up to now almost felt like something elusive, but it is critical at this point. So whether we work with government to create the right architecture and enabling environment that can crowd in private sector investment and work with people and civil society to ensure that we've met those needs and we understand what those are is going to be critical if we are going to shape this future that we know we actually can shape.
And let's discuss really how organizations like the NBI play the role of connecting and facilitating these relationships.
What we try to do is to really find the spaces where we can convene the different players, the different stakeholders. The multi-stakeholder engagement and conversation is going to be critical. If we don't get all the perspectives around the table, it's going to be very difficult to facilitate such a transition. So that's one role we play, is that we try our best to convene because of the number of leading companies that are NBI members, but of course not just NBI members, but companies that are interested in the transition. That's one element. And then bringing together government. In fact, the pavilion is a demonstration of a partnership, where business can help support through the sponsorship of the pavilion, but the DFFE, of course, has recognized that that partnership is beneficial and we work together. Another space is for different stakeholders to get exposure. Through a pavilion, for example, like this, it's one of the rare opportunities that we can get multiple people in the room at the same time in a pavilion like the South African one, where people that normally wouldn't get a chance to meet actually are here. We've got senior leaders in business, we've got senior people from government, we've got stakeholders from civil society that are here, and it's a great platform to be able to have that engagement and then hopefully start building the relationships that are going to build the businesses and the partnerships that are going to build our country.
Now, Shamila, let's look back a little bit. I do believe that this is your second COP. Talk to me about some of the significant lessons learned so far.
So far, I think, again, absolutely collaboration is going to be critical. I think that we are in a context of political uncertainty globally. We need to be able to, I think, march forward on where we can effect change. almost in spite of some of the political challenges that persist, because the science is very clear about what needs to be achieved. And it is in all of our interest to ensure that we achieve that and actually look beyond that. So that for me was the one lesson. The second one, I think, was that there's a deep willingness of people to want to do this despite some of the challenges that we're seeing. So that's certainly there. I think the third one, it is critical that private sector is brought along with this, and that there's the platforms for that engagement and communication, open, honest communication that builds trust. I think there's a massive trust deficit across the globe, across sectors, between different players, and we have to bridge those divides. So for me, those are already some of the key themes developing.
So to me about Old Mutual's role in facilitating the South African dialogue at COP29.
Sure. Yeah, well, we're a proud member of the South African delegation here at COP29 and very happy to participate in that. It turns out we are the largest private sector investor on behalf of our clients on the continent of Africa. And this is all about mobilizing capital, public and private, to solve the world's problems, including Africa's problems in terms of climate change.
And talk to me about the importance of partnering with like-minded stakeholders, especially at forums like these.
Yeah, it's critical. And actually in South Africa, and probably across Africa, we're very fortunate because stakeholders are aligned. If you take corporates, if you take asset owners, if you take regulators, government, asset managers, we're all aligned with the same purpose, which is to look for a greener economy, look for a just transition to get there, which is critical for South Africa, and ensuring that the social good we do continues across the nation, whilst reinvesting in both the economy and the green economy to get to that greener future we all want.
And speaking as a representative of a financier, tell us exactly how Old Mutual is stimulating investment and engagement, especially from foreign investors.
Absolutely. So offshore money into Africa is being mobilized. Strangely, we've just closed, with a very successful close, our latest infrastructure fund for Africa. And we raised from offshore clients close to $1 billion, including co-investment. So $1 billion is going to be deployed across the nation of Africa through that program, including in green economy assets. And then partnering with local players in terms of public-private partnerships. We have wonderful conversations now with government. And that public-private partnership in terms of mobilizing capital more broadly for the good of the nation is a great conversation to have, and we're part of that.
And just finally, what would you like to see just at the end of this year's conference? What would you like to see? What would you like to hear?
I think for me, a lot of it is about mobilizing capital in a positive sense into the green economy. I mean, a lot of these discussions are extremely worthwhile and critical in terms of course, the fossil fuel discussion. But for me, just mobilizing private capital and the opportunities, particularly for Africa, in terms of facilitating the green economy and generating sustainable returns from that endeavor, which means that the capital can be recycled back into the green economy. And that's a really good conversation to have, and I think will be a big part of solving the issues we have right now.
And that's all we had for you in this special episode of Focus On. In an era of rising global temperatures and extreme weather patterns, COP29 presents an opportunity for action. For myself and the team, it's goodbye for now.